Thanks, Daniel, for getting us started. This is Greg Core, the MSIP director, and I appreciate you joining us this afternoon for what I think is going to be a really fascinating call. It'll be an interactive session, and we'll be hearing about 3 states who are improving outcomes for children with disabilities by aligning their SPDIG and OSEP activities, implementing evidence-based practices, and using data-driven improvement cycles in IDEA Parts B and Part C. Participants will have an opportunity to share lessons learned through their own SPDIG and OSEP work and ask questions to gain further understanding of the highlighted states examples. So we have 3 states, as I mentioned, Alabama, Part B, Maine, Part B, and Oklahoma. I can't see, but it looks like, is that Part C for Oklahoma?
Part B and C, Greg.
B and C, okay.
Yes.
My screen is partially covered up. Screen, okay. OSEP is committed to results-driven accountability, RDA, as we've mentioned before. Our ultimate goal, ours and yours, I'm sure, is improving outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. Our Assistant Secretary, Glenna Gallo, and our OSEP Director, Valerie Williams, have communicated the importance of compliance, but we all recognize compliance is just a floor. It doesn't guarantee that we're going to get to improved outcomes. So to this end, OSEP will use a series of national TA calls to highlight priority areas around improved outcomes. So this is the first of that series. In these calls, OSEP will collaborate with TA partners, with states, such as we're doing today, and it'll be not just MSIP staff, but also RTP staff, also as exemplified in today's call. Also, we are working with our state leads so that they can have follow-up conversations with their states after these TA calls. So we are hoping that in this in this small way, we can begin to have some important conversations about what states are doing to improve outcomes. So I will turn it over to Jeanette to get us started.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon. As I said a few minutes ago, I'm Jeanette Guerra. I'm a state lead in the Monitoring and State Improvement Planning Division of OSEP. I'm also on the data implementation team, and I've had the privilege of reviewing most, if not all, of the state systemic improvement plans. And I say privilege because the OSEP is really near and dear to my heart. Our time is limited today, so I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I want to share just a little bit about my own experiences with developing, implementing, and evaluating an OSEP at the state level. So I was working at the state level when OSEP first began requiring OSEP reporting in 2014. We had identified our Part C SIMR and the evidence-based practices we wanted to be implementing, our theory of action and our evaluation plan, and we set out to implement with a subset of our Part C programs. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't easy. We stumbled along for a couple of years, honestly, as we were building our own capacity to do this system-changing work. But things really clicked into place for us when we began operationalizing the implementation science concepts. So much so that it really transformed how we approached all of our state work, not just our OSEP work. And for me, it has really forever transformed how I think about all of our collective work. I can't unlearn what I know about implementation and improvement sciences, and really believe that it is the bridge that that improves the gap between what we know to be effective in research and what is actually practiced to improve results. And that's the whole point of the OSEPs, right? To really build full systems that support the sustained implementation of evidence-based practices and improve those results for children with disabilities and their families. So I'm always excited to hear about how others have experienced success this way, and for those that may not be as familiar with some of these concepts, to explore ways to integrate them more into their own plans and get onto the trajectory that you want to be on to see improvements. So I am going to now give this to my colleague Jennifer Coffey to talk a little bit about the SPDIG.
Thanks, Jeanette. And it's been lovely working between the MSIP and RTP team to put this together and with the states. And I'm so appreciative that we've been able to team up on this. I oversaw a state personnel development grant, actually oversaw a state improvement grant before it changed names in a state as well. So Jeanette and I both have a state background. I was at the SCA and I had no idea what I was doing, really. But I did know that there was more out there, that there was more to understand. And so when I found the implementation frameworks from the National Implementation Research Network, which is now the state, now they have a center with us, CSEP, State Implementation and Scaling of Evidence-Based Practice, TA Center. When I first saw that monograph, it was all these things that I knew were important. I'd been reading in the research that, you know, fidelity is important, that you've got to connect the fidelity to outcomes, that, you know, coaching. We were starting to understand from Joyce and Showers how that you should not have one-time training, right? It's a workshop wasn't going to do it. You needed coaching. So I knew I had all these pieces, and then having a framework or a group of frameworks to bring it together was really helpful. So I agree with that statement that you made, Jeanette, that implementation science, once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. And I remember hearing from a state at one of the OSEP conferences that they had started two things, and I think it was in Part C at the same time, one with implementation science and one without, and one is still going today and the other petered out and died. And, you know, it's somewhat anecdotal, but I think it's true. And so thinking about alignment, we'll talk about a little bit later, but thinking about implementation science and thinking about outcomes is why we're here today. We're thinking about alignment, implementation science, outcomes, and you're going to be able to hear from states and how they're doing that. So without further ado, as I said, these state stories, you're going to hear something from every state that you can take and leverage in your own state and work from. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alabama to tell a little bit about their story.
Thank you. I'm Ashley Colley with the Alabama State Department of Education, Special Education Services Section. I am our State Systemic Improvement Plan Coordinator. I'm joined today by several members of my team, including our State Director of Special Education, Dr. Delee Chambers, our State Personnel Development Grant Director, Celeste Miner, our administrators, Dr. Kamichi Green and Patrice Harble, our data team specialists, Dr. Melissa Card, and our external evaluator of our OSEP and our SPDIG, Jocelyn Coolidge. All right. So when our State Department began reviewing its data for Indicator 17, the state was already 2 years into the SPDIG grant. And at that time, the SPDIG focused on closing the gap for academics and behavior between students with and without an IEP, as well as providing the professional learning regarding secondary transition in that effort to improve post-school outcomes. The OSEP data review conducted in 2014 pointed to similar needs. And so the state focused its OSEP initiatives to improve post-school outcomes. Specifically, our state's SIMR was identified as Indicator 14B, or the percentage of students with IEPs who attend college or are competitively employed 1 year after leaving school. Due to that common goal of improving post-school outcomes, our OSEP and SPDIG activities were graded. As you can see in this image, the 6 OSEP initiatives work to improve Indicator 14B. If you look at the 3 hexagons on the right, those relate to our SPDIG Goal 1, and then the 3 hexagons on the left relate to our SPDIG Goal 2. And then if you'll click just the image again. Thank you. So today I'm going to highlight the secondary transition work just for the purpose of time. Although our SPDIG project has changed its goals over the prior 2 competitions, and the OSEP has had some modifications to its activities, a common thread has been secondary transition initiative. The OSEP includes 3 initiatives that relate to secondary transition preparation. As you can see here in the image, whereas our SPDIG includes only 1 transition goal that encompasses that work. So by braiding those activities of the 2 projects, our State Department has been able to concentrate its efforts and align its work amongst our staff, our districts, our teachers, and our leaders. Okay, next slide. The Alabama's OSEP and SPDIG transition work includes the 3 initiatives that you see here. The first is the implementation of comprehensive transition activities in cohort of districts and schools. Specifically, the state provides funding for cohort districts to purchase an evidence-based transition curriculum, and that would be something like Stanfield Transitions Curriculum or Project Discovery. The state also provides external coaches who work with our teachers to implement the curriculum, and they tie specific lessons to students' IEP goals. The coaches also assist cohort districts or schools with creating or furthering developing a transition team. The coaches encourage teams to include community members, which has also helped build those community-based work opportunities for our students. The schools also work on building school-based work opportunities. And these would be things like restaurants, selling seeds and plants, those coffee carts that we see even at the middle school level. The Transition Infrastructure Initiative is primarily OSEP, since these activities are building infrastructure and not necessarily professional learning. One of the central activities of this initiative is improving the state's post-school outcomes survey, and that's used for collecting Indicator 14 data. Our state provides guidance on data collection in an effort to improve the quality of those survey results. Other infrastructure activities include whole state transition supports, and this would be something like our Engage Alabama app or Engage AL app. And this is for students to use to help plan their transition steps, or a needs assessment by school staff. The last initiative, the third initiative, this is shared both by our OSEP and our SPDIG. It addresses family and stakeholder engagement related to secondary transition. The state contracts with our Alabama Parent Training Information Center, ALPTI. It is called APEC, which is Alabama Parent Education Center, and it's to offer training for families on transition. The PTI and our State Department collaborate to host focus groups and interviews with families of students in grades 6 through 12. The focus of this is to discuss their concerns and their needs regarding transition. One result from the focus groups was the need to encourage students to participate in their own transition planning. As a result, the state has added a question to its Alabama Parent Survey used for Indicator 8. And this is to determine what percentage of parents report their secondary students are participating in their IEP meetings. And so those are our 3 transition initiatives. They are designed, again, to improve our state's Indicator 14B data. And I do want to share that when comparing to their baseline scores, the OSEP and SPDIG cohort districts have shown a significantly larger increase in their Indicator 14B percentages than the state. So that's something that we're really proud of. And that is it for Alabama.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's lovely. I have to say, one of the things I immediately noticed was the family focus on this, which is critical, and also student voice and getting students involved in the IEP. It's nice to see and hearing about the outcomes. And I also, if someone from the Alabama team has a chance, it'd be great I've seen I think it's the Rainbow Cafe videos about that and on the news. So that's an example of one of the restaurants that was supported for the transition work. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. I'm going to turn this over for the Math for Maine team. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We're going to start with with the SPDIGs. We do a lot of thinking of ways that we can do introductions, led by Jennifer Coffey. So we're going to do our bucket lists. So Aaron Frazier, the state director, may or may not be on this call today, but I'm Tracy Whitlock. I coordinate special projects for inclusive education at the Maine Department of Education. And I also, along with Anne-Marie Adamson, coordinate and lead the SPDIG work and the OSEP work for the state of Maine. And my bucket list item is my son lives in the Netherlands and I want to go there in the spring so that I can see the tulips. I went last winter and it was cold and beautiful, but I want to be able to go in April or May and see all of the tulips. And Anne-Marie is going to share, do you want me to share we're in the same room, I apologize. So I'm going to share Anne-Marie's for her, but she's here. And we can travel together because she wants to go to Iceland, and that's what is in her bucket list, is to go to Iceland. Anne-Marie and I are together in the same space today because we are just finishing up our 13th annual PBIS conference that we had over 450 people participating in today and even had visitors from Canada. So we are now claiming that the Maine PBIS conference is an international conference as well. So we're really excited about that. I bring up Maine PBIS because that's also part of our SPDIG. So our SPDIG includes the Maine PBIS work that we've been doing over the years and our Math for Maine work. And they existed in two different realms. It was like they were very siloed before we got the SPDIG. And getting that SPDIG grant really gave us the opportunity to start having conversations about implementation science and thinking around what have we learned from both projects, from each one, and how can they support each other in that thinking and that implementation science. So in our Math for Maine project over the years, we had small groups working with teachers, and we would do training for teachers and there was individual coaching. And we would see some effects on student outcomes, which of course is what the focus is, but we found that our end was small. We're a large state, but a small population state. And so recruiting for schools, recruiting people to become part of these small groups became really difficult. And then our PBIS, we have this cohort model, obviously based on implementation science as well, and thinking about those teams of schools that are coming in and getting those supports and that coaching and the training throughout 3 years of practice. So once we received the SPDIG grant, and we started having conversations between the teams, thinking about how do we align these initiatives so that they can be supporting each other. So instead of the math team never talking to the PBIS team, how do we come together to have conversations about our implementation science so that we can learn from each other and grow and have outcomes in both areas that we're focusing on in behavior and mathematics. So we really started making that shift with the Math for Maine project, and you can see our logo here. Making math meaningful for all, and moved it from working with small groups of teachers looking at just their classroom practice to a school-wide approach and looking at how do we provide supports for an entire school so that we're seeing those changes in that thinking about mathematics over the years. In the Math for Maine project, we also pulled from the PBIS thinking in terms of culture and climate that you create in a school. We found in the state of Maine, and I think this is probably nationally, if you ask elementary or even middle school teachers, many of them will talk about that math, that they'll always say that they're reading people. They're always focused on reading. But a lot of people, if you ask them, do you like math? They'll say, I'm not a math person. And so we really started thinking about how do we change that culture? And Anne-Marie just reminded me that I forgot to say that the Math for Maine project is our OSEP. So I apologize. I get so excited about our SPDIG, but it is our OSEP as well. And so that we are doing both of those. And so thinking about the really shifting, we are focusing on those strategies for mathematics with 1 or 2 teachers, training, coaching, and really we've made this step back to look at how do we think about mathematics as a culture and climate across an entire school, and what are the benefits for students, all students in the school, making math meaningful for all, and for students with disabilities. So instead of thinking about mathematics in a way of how do we focus on just the instruction for students with disabilities, how do we focus on instruction of mathematics for all students in the school, including students with disabilities, so that's in a more inclusive setting? So thinking about that all again. So, and again, also thinking about that meaningful piece and focusing on meaningful instruction for all students. So the Math for Maine project, in those conversations and looking at our data and being able to make some shifts, we focus on the culture, we focus on mathematical principles and conceptual understanding of math, and really thinking about what are some of those routines in math that can provide that setting for all students so that they can all be thinking about mathematics together. At the conference today, we had a session where there was someone having conversations about content standards and students with disabilities within a PBIS framework and within an MTSS, and thinking about how do we set those high standards for students and so that they can grow and then we'll get those outcomes. We're thinking about students within that inclusive setting. And so having students be in classrooms that are at their grade level, instead of constantly removing them from mathematics instruction and focusing on where they may be, instead of helping them to, as Anne-Marie beautifully said to me today, breadcrumbs. How do we get those to get kids to where they are on grade level instead of having low expectations for students, and really thinking about it that way. So the Math for Maine work as our OSEP really this year is a big shift, and we're really excited to see what our outcomes are going to be this year and continuing this work. This also, and this alignment is continuing to happen. Our PBIS work, our Math for Maine work, we also do work in literacy and dyslexia and transition, and thinking about how do we align all of that work as we move forward. And I love how Alabama talked about braiding their work. How do we braid all of those together to really have this focus on inclusion and inclusionary practices for students so that all of our students have those opportunities, those post-secondary opportunities once they leave our K-12 settings. And the culture shifts. Anne-Marie's talking to me over here, and the culture shifts. I totally forgot one more thing, and then I'm going to stop. We have amazing external evaluators for our SPDIG, and we have additional for our OSEP as well. And they've really been helpful in helping us design and to think about our practices and our outcomes and our logic models and really pushing our thinking and helping us. And one of our external evaluators shared with us recently, she said, Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so we focused so much on our OSEP on math strategies and math and thinking about how do we teach kids to think about math, but we forgot to think about the culture. And so creating that math culture. So Anne-Marie, thank you so much for reminding me about that quote. And we're really excited to continue this work. This is our first cycle. We are just in the beginning days of our third year of our SPDIG. And so we're really excited to see how this work with the SPDIG is really going to influence our OSEP and our outcomes for students with disabilities.
And we're all excited too. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. You're looking at how to make improvements by using so many different sources of data, and some also including, anecdotal and conversations and what you're seeing. And just one little story that you didn't share, but I thought was kind of interesting is that you're thinking about how you engage families and communication with families and trying to make that meaningful as well. And we spent a lot of conversation, a lot of time on how to make the perfect postcard to families that would get them into the website, that would help them to be involved in math with their kids' school, et cetera. But that's the right conversation, right?
It's very exciting.
Yeah, it is. So talking about alignment doesn't always mean that it's, that you have to make everything the same project, but can you share coaching services? Can you share data systems? Can you share evaluators? Maybe that's possible too. So thank you, Tracy and Anne-Marie. All right, our next and final state is Oklahoma. And this is exciting because we have both Part B and Part C represented for the Oklahoma OSEP and SPDIG stories. So I'm going to turn things over to Kristen and the Oklahoma team.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. I'm Kristen Perez-Rickles. I am our program manager and the director of the State Personnel Development Grant for Oklahoma. We decided that we were going to do the bucket list introduction also And so my bucket list is also a travel one. My husband and I have been saying for 10 years, since before we got married, that we were going to go to Ireland together and spend some time there. I really want to see the cliffs of, I can't even say it, Moher. And he really just wants to go to like get a good Guinness. But that is on my bucket list, and it is tentatively scheduled for next summer. So wish me luck. And I'm going to turn it over to Alexa Hudak to introduce herself and her bucket list.
Hi, I'm Alexa Hudak. I'm a project manager at the department, and my focus is the OSEP Part B. My bucket list item, I am a foodie and I would really love to try sea urchin. So that's my bucket list item.
Hey, my name is Kim Donnell. I am a project manager for our Part C, which is Sooner Start. And on my bucket list, it's a small one. I'm sure everybody will think it's funny, but I would like to visit Maine. So my Maine people on here, I'm coming one of these days.
All right. So what Jennifer just said about alignment not meaning necessarily the same thing, but how do we share resources and how do we leverage resources is really our project, or really what we attempted to do. So both our Part B and Part C OSEP cycle was a year ahead of this SPDIG cycle for us. So we were in a really unique position as we were writing our proposal, our grant application for this newest SPDIG, to really look at what we were currently doing or what we had proposed to do in our OSEPs and in other areas of our agency, and thinking about how we can really leverage that work and then scale that work beyond these specific SIMRs or these specific sites or areas. And so our SPDIG is focused on an integrated multi-tiered system of support. So we do provide coaching for systems to districts, full K through 12 districts, on implementation of MTSS for systems change, focusing on an integrated MTSS though that is addressing academics and behavior. And then another one of our goals within our SPDIG is looking at how do we, in those contexts and in those systems, also support early career special educators on implementing specific evidence-based practices. And so I'm going to let Alexa and Kim talk a little bit about how SPDIG has begged, borrowed, stolen, and scaled some of their work and where we found those connection points.
Sure. So in our OSEP Part B, we have a lot of similar coordinated activities. We both are providing instructional coaching with specific teachers. The OSEP focuses on K through 3 educators with early literacy as a part of our SIMR, whereas the SPDIG is more broadly focused on early career teachers. We're both utilizing a gym night coaching model. We've developed an intervention library, an academic intervention library, and then SPDIG is extending that to a behavior intervention library as well that utilizes evidence-based practices that we are coaching specifically and also utilizing in our broad focus with our schools. We've collaborated on a data retreat that's led with the OSEP, and then the SPDIG districts and schools that are participating attend and engage with developing action plans and looking at their root cause and their data. And then we are building into that intervention library all of the fidelity measures that teachers can utilize to evaluate the integrity and fidelity of their practice, utilizing those evidence-based practices. And then Kim, I'll turn it over to you and how you are working with SPDIG with Part C.
Thank you. So ours looks a little bit different on how we work with SPDIG. Really, we coordinated efforts in one location at this current moment. And it's pretty cool because this one current location, it's McAlester, Oklahoma, doesn't just have support. Oh, maybe I should go back a second. Our OSEP is the pyramid model framework. So we also are implementing a multi-tiered system of support to help families within the homes. So now we'll fast forward. So we did we coordinated these efforts in McAllister, Oklahoma. And it's pretty cool because the preschool development grant is also in that area. So there's daycares and there is Head Starts and also then early intervention with us using all pyramid model. And then Kristen is there with the state personnel development grant within the school system. So right at this current moment, we're trying to align in that area. What does it look like if a child is coming from a daycare or Head Start or early intervention that uses this pyramid model framework? What does it look like to transition into a school system that is using maybe a pyramid model like something in their early childhood, and seeing if we can align kind of that conversation so that when families are looking at it or a teacher, they kind of know where the kid has come from and they can back that system. So we also do a systems coaching approach. We have program coaches that go into those areas and helps to build out their system for a pyramid model. Our implementation fidelity measures is the ages and stages questionnaire, social emotional versions. So we do that. I'm trying to think, Kristen. Oh, we should probably mention that we are getting ready to replicate what is happening in McAllister in Ardmore, which is kind of southern Oklahoma. So we're going to be able to duplicate the same coverage from birth to graduation with some type of tiered framework. We're going to try and duplicate that in Ardmore, which is a little bit different area. But we also have some tribal community that is interested in maybe bringing that on too. So we'll have a really expansive area down there. So
Yes.
Kristen, what did I forget?
No, you did great. That was everything. The only really interesting thing for us that's different in Ardmore is some of those Head Starts are pre-K Head Starts that are operating in their school setting. They've got rooms actually in their school buildings. They already align some of their professional development with them. So it's going to be really interesting to see how we replicate this model in another geographic area with slightly different contextual resources and cultural input.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love a Venn diagram. I love the components you all have pulled out here. I mean, and it helps so much, not just with this presentation, but any group you talk to, right? You've got an advisory team, maybe who you're talking with, or administrators who want to know what you all are up to. And this is just an easy way to share it. So thank you for helping us understand and for coordinating all these different services. I always say, it makes the federal employee heart warm when they see alignment and integration, rating and blending, that kind of thing. So it's very nice to see it in action here. Thank you all.
Yes. The only other thing that we'll say that is not related to SPDIG and OSEP is you can see there are things that all three of us are doing kind of collaboratively. But one thing we as an agency are really working toward is agency alignment of these resources. So it's not a SPDIG support for early career special educators, but it's just how is the Oklahoma State Department of Education supporting early career educators. So we're also having quite a few conversations with our Office of Teacher Support, Recruitment and Retention on how are we aligning SPDIG's early career initiative with our first class initiative in that area. And then also with our new 15-person regional literacy instructional team, we are sharing all of the things we already developed through the OSEPs and through the SPDIG on things like coaching logs and fidelity measures and intervention protocols, so that we are just scaling it to these new sites rather than having them reinvent the wheel and use their capacity that way.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Kristen. I know with there are many laws related to science of reading right now that are looking at whole statewide implementation and all the things we could be learning from the SPDIG and OSEP work and leveraging into that. These components right here point at what can be leveraged in the science of reading efforts. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, and now we come to, and I missed this. Do you still want to talk about this, or did we cover it?
I think we covered it. Thank you, though.
I forgot. All right. So now we come to breakout rooms, everybody's favorite opportunity to get to know what other states are doing and share your own story. We have facilitators for every room from OSEP. So you may see someone you know in there. We're going to give every person in a room a chance to share their thoughts on one of the questions. You just get to choose one. Do you want to talk about alignment? And do you want to talk about your OSEP and SPDIG alignment or other alignment that's happening in your state? Do you want to talk about implementation science? How are you working on communication protocols, implementation teams, measuring capacity? There's so many opportunities there. And then what impact are you seeing on outcomes from your work? So choose one of those and your facilitator will call on you. And hopefully the questions are already in the chat. Folks have put them in there and we plan to push them out as well. So Daniel, let's go ahead and randomly assign folks to the room.
Jennifer, can I just say, please don't go away in the breakout rooms. We want to come back and still hear some from these 3 states. So please, we'll spend just a few minutes in breakout rooms and then come back.
Thank you. There's a panel to come. We're going to have a question for each of the states that you're going to really want to hear the answer to. So thank you, Jeanette. We'll see you in a minute. And getting to know other states and maybe other TA providers. We talked about the exploration stage and how important it was sometimes to go a little slower at the beginning. Say maybe use the hexagon tool, think about what's feasible, what's a fit, what you can sustain with the necessary support. So that was our conversation. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeanette Guerra to lead us through the panel discussion.
Thanks everyone for everyone who participated in the small group discussions. That time went quick, didn't it? We are going to turn our attention back to the 3 states, Alabama, Maine, and Oklahoma, and move into our panel discussion. We're going to ask everyone except the speakers to turn off their cameras right now if you've had them on in the breakouts. We have a few questions, and although we would really love to hear each state's response to each of these questions, we don't have time. It is quickly running out on us today. So I'm going to go through and ask each state to answer one of the questions. So I'm going to start with Maine. So Team Maine, what would you say is the most important lesson you or your team has learned through your SPDIG and OSEP activities?
I think being able to pivot and being willing to change. I think once we get started with something, you have your outcomes and you create your logic model and you say, this is how we're going to do this work. And then you get your results and you go, well, maybe next time it'll look different. And you keep going and really being able to say, you know what, this isn't working. And it's okay to say this isn't working and it's time to pivot and to shift and to learn from implementation science, to learn from other projects you're doing, to learn. One of the wonderful things about being a SPDIG receiver is the networking and the collaboration we felt with other states and being able to have open conversations about this is working, this isn't, what are you doing? And really looking to each other and to the research base to find other approaches and other ways of doing it. But again, being able to say it's okay, it's okay to make that change and to pivot.
Yeah, that's such an important lesson, right? Such a key piece, and why those continuous improvement cycles are so necessary, right? That they're built in, it's part of your processes so that you have those built-in intentional opportunities to look at what you plan doing, look at how it was implemented, what was the result of that? Are we still on the right track? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to course adjust? That's a key thing. I appreciate you saying that so much. And then the networking, using the resources you have within your own states and systems, and then even beyond, which we hope that's part of what today's call helps other people with too, is learning about resources and who else they might tap into. So thanks, Tracy, for that. All right, so let's hear from Team Oklahoma. And if you could tell us, what advice do you have for states that might feel kind of stuck in their plans, or maybe they're not seeing the results that they would have expected to see at this point?
So Tracy's kind of lesson learned is honestly our response to this question also. It's go back to your data, look at your data. Don't feel like you have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, find what was effective and what worked. But also don't be afraid to pivot. I know we spend a lot of time writing out our plans and being really intentional about what they will look like. But that's in our ideal world. And we know that things don't always go according to plan and people don't always respond the way we anticipate they will. And so don't be afraid to change what you said you were going to do based on what you know will be effective. And that is something that Alexa, Kim, and I have all talked about, is reaching out to those thought partners, walking through that data, and going back to those basics of your theory of action also. If your theory of action is not resulting in the anticipated change, change those actions.
Exactly. Yeah. And thanks for mentioning the theory of action, those evaluation plans, those things that were for OSEP kind of early requirements in terms of reporting, but things that, again, through these processes need to be continually, at least annually, right, looked at. Are we still doing what we said we were going to do? Do we need to change anything along the way? I'm curious, Kristen, can you speak to at all to like how long did it take your teams to kind of get in that rhythm of doing those things? And that's an on the spot question, so I apologize.
No, that's totally fine. And Kim and Alexa can jump in at any point also. I would argue that we are still working on finding that rhythm, and there are always curveballs thrown our way. I think, you know, we have people who come in and come out of the agency, and that kind of messes up a little bit of that cohesion. But having people who are passionate, who are coming back to the table continuously and want to continue working with each other is really key. And then also documenting what's been done and what's been effective. So when there is that turnover, we can refer back to our historical data to say, we can't get rid of this because it led to really amazing things.
Yes, thank you. Great advice all around. And so key that documentation piece, right? We all experience turnover. There will be people coming and going on our teams. And so it takes some intentionality to first document the process along the way, but then also as those new team members are brought on board to be able to get them up to speed and on the same page with the rest of your team and understanding what's our mission here together. What are we doing? How are we doing it? How do we agree to do that? So thank you. Thank you, Oklahoma, for that. And then finally, the team from Alabama, can you please tell us how you've intentionally involved parents and other stakeholders as those true, authentic thought partners in the development, implementation, and evaluation of your SPDIG and your OSEP work?
I think I can answer that on behalf of Alabama. There are 6 different initiatives that they use to work with parents, so it's multifaceted, but 2 in particular that I think are pretty unique. One is related to longitudinal focus groups with parents, and Alabama partners with their PTI to identify family members, and together we have typically 3 focus groups per year for these families, and they're the same families over years, which allows us to be able to see the changes over time. It's been a great resource for evaluation, but also just getting ideas for how to address transition set services for the state. The other idea that they do is in their parent survey, they have included an IEP participation measure. And so that goes out to all family members, as you know, with an IEP. And that has been able to provide data for the state about their the participation of students in their IEPs. That was as a result of the OSEP, actually.
Great. Such important work to be doing with families. And I could hear from things that you were saying. One, I think it's fabulous you're partnering with your parent centers to make those connections and then keeping those parents engaged in the process. And the fact that you're able to keep those same groups of parents like really speaks to how you're helping to build their capacity to really authentically be those thought partners with you, right? And I heard you say you're getting ideas from them. It's not just
Oh, yeah.
you presenting information to them and kind of getting a response. They're part of the back and forth discussion and planning and development. So, I mean, that's really what we like to hear and see. And I think it's challenging. So you might need to kind of market what you're doing. Is there any resource that has been particularly helpful or that you would like to share with other states?
I'm just going to tell everyone about it because it's my new favorite resource.
Okay.
But NERN has their new implementation support practitioner competencies and kind of those guidelines. And I think that is an amazing thing for anyone who does any sort of implementation support or coaching to look at and make sure that they're addressing those activities and those competencies really intentionally in their rollout and implementation work.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. That's a nice segue. Jennifer, if we could pull our slides back up.
Yeah, this is the website and I'll put it on in the
Thank you.
chat just so folks can see what Kristen was just talking about.
These are just a few of the tools. The first two are also part of that AI hub. And the hexagon tool is used to better understand how a new or an existing program or practice fits into your implementation site's current work and context. This initiative inventory can guide the team's review of past and current programs to get a clear picture of successful strategies and challenges. The program assessment sustainability tool is something out of Washington University in St. Louis, and one of the states is recommending using that. It helps teams to assess their program's current capacity for sustainability across a range of specific organizational and contextual factors. We've also included a white paper here on evaluating professional learning, given that that's the primary focus of the SPDIG and an important infrastructure component of the OSEP. And then finally, we've included a link to Alabama's SPDIG website that if we had more time, we would have loved for them to go through, but everybody has these links. You'll have the links and access to this PowerPoint on our website. And then again, just real quickly, we want to remind everyone of the fabulous support available from our TA centers and encourage you to access them. Again, personally, when I was at the state level and doing the OSEP work, we took full advantage of the expertise of the TA centers, and I truly credit them with helping us to build our capacity at every level. And so finally, we are almost at time. A huge thank you to Alabama, to Maine, to Oklahoma, your teams for sharing your experiences, and everyone taking the time to be here today. System change work is complex. There's a lot to keep in mind, and it takes truly years to really affect change and see those improvement in outcomes. We appreciate your commitment to just that. So we hope that this supports your work, your own work in achieving the results you strive for. Big thank you to all of our veterans and military connected families out there. We owe you a debt of gratitude, and we wish you all a peaceful holiday and weekend.